Well, right? Now, a manipulative preacher could turn that into something on Stewardship Sunday. Yeah, it's a terrible parable. Or, well, it sure sounds like it ends that way. Because would Jesus say these awful things? Or did he? So before judging this as a terrible parable, perhaps I should give Jesus a break and ask Matthew, why did you put these terrible words into the mouth of Jesus? Did Jesus say these things? So you may have heard of a group called the Jesus Seminar. It's a group of scholars in the study of the historical Jesus who built on the work of previous scholars, and I respect and mostly trust their scholarship, their wisdom. Well, they notably went through all four Gospels, plus the Gospel of Thomas, and determined what Jesus undoubtedly said, what he may have likely said, what he didn't say, and what he undoubtedly didn't say. And each phrase or word was printed in corresponding red, pink, gray, and black. And you would be shocked, truly shocked, by how few words are in red. Like love your enemies, which Jesus undoubtedly said. More of them are in pink, which means Jesus would have likely said it or something similar. Don't fret about your life, what you're going to eat and drink. Now, there are more in gray, which in their opinion Jesus didn't say, but are perhaps in the spirit of his teaching. Shockingly, the vast majority of these words are printed in black, which they assert means Jesus did not say, but were put in the mouth of Jesus by the gospel writers who represented different traditions and perspectives. And it wasn't done with malice. It wasn't meant in a bad way. We all tell stories that advance our point of view. That's what each gospel writer did. And remember, there was nobody walking around recording what he was saying. These, for decades, were oral stories. So, according to the Jesus Seminar folks, very little was undoubtedly said by Jesus. But I was surprised to see that these scholars think Jesus likely did tell today's parable, or something similar. However, those red and pink words end just before the offending verses. Those who have more will be given more, and from those who don't have even what they have will be taken away. Now that may describe how the world really is, rich getting richer, but it's hard to believe, and it's unlikely Jesus would say such a thing as a promise of punishment. Now maybe about hypocrites, whom he regularly called broods of vipers. He reserved those words for religious authorities and legal experts, but he didn't say that to people, ordinary people struggling to survive. These words, the harsh words, however, are consistent with Matthew's point of view. He had a penchant for stories about final judgment, along with those threats of outer darkness and the weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's 4 stories right in a row, and 2 of them are about weeping and gnashing of teeth. One of them is some of people are going to be shut out of the kingdom of God, and the 4th one, similarly, is not inviting. These are the words of Matthew. Of course, however, we can't just go around picking and choosing what we like that Jesus said. Right? Seminar scholars caution, beware of finding a Jesus who says only the things you want your Jesus to say. Which is very true, because there are things Jesus said that I prefer not to hear. Things that challenge my point of view, my privilege. Whenever we get too comfortable or complacent, Jesus calls us over and over to change our hearts and lives. But back to the parable. Minus that terribly offensive ending, there is wisdom here to explore. So, you heard valuable coins. Most of you have heard the story before told with the word talents. That's what I'm going to be talking about, talents. And when I think about talents, I think I'm going to take singing, dancing, fiddle playing. But maybe I should ask for talents in accounting and financial planning, because Jesus isn't talking about talents in the way we think of them. A talent in this context isn't a skill or a special ability. It's explicitly about money. And a talent, or Greek for talenton, isn't just a valuable coin. It really shocks me that the Common English Bible did it that way, because all wisdom seems to be this talenton. It isn't just a coin that you give at the end of a day's labor. According to my Bible, one talent is worth approximately 16 years worth of wages for an average worker. So according to ZipRecruiter, the average annual salary in San Diego today is $69,337. Of course, remember, this isn't a story about a literal transaction. It's a story, but in this parable, that would mean the first servant was handed the equivalent of $5.5 million to handle, which he then doubled, and the second servant was handed $2.2 million, which she doubled, but the third buried 16 years of salary, $1.1 million in a hole, accusing the man of being wealthy through ill-gotten means, right? Harvesting crops he didn't plant. And maybe it's true, the master was a no-good SOB. But behind it, what's really going on? This servant was afraid of failing. Therefore, he put nothing at risk so he wouldn't fail, which is how he failed. He failed by doing nothing so nothing will be lost. Doing nothing so nothing will be lost. Now, that's not you, and that's not this church. Rather, because of you, our church is changing lives. Now, that may sound a little dramatic, but I have a couple examples. Last year's Lenten study focused on God's earth, our call. Now, you might think a Lenten study on Zoom would have very little big impact, but at the end of it, one of our students preparing for college this fall changed his major to environmental studies. He heard his own call, and who knows how many lives he will then change as a result of that. Our church is changing lives. A family in Tijuana this morning is living in their own house because 24 youth and adults quite literally put a roof over their heads in February, and they're excited to get ready to build another one. Church is changing lives. You know, because of our church, right now there are 158 people with a roof over their heads just a block away in Green Manor, and another 100 in First Congregational Memorial Tower. Visionary church folks 50 years ago built these towers for which we still serve as the board of directors, and today we're figuring out how we can build even more housing for seniors, which is one of the fastest growing groups of people who are unsheltered. Our church wants to change more lives. And we have an apartment ready and waiting for the next woman and her children fleeing domestic violence that will allow them a year of stability. It's a continuing ministry for the past 20 years, and think how many lives have been impacted. Lives that have been changed by our church. And when it gets colder this winter and someone needs a hat or a scarf to stay warm overnight, they may receive one of the 160 that the group has knit already this year, our group called Knitting to Give, or the clothes that are collected for Rachel's house. Our church is changing their lives. All these children and youth running around. Oh my gosh, I don't know whose life has changed more, theirs or our own, my own, when we see them growing and stretching into their faith, putting it into action. And 2 weeks ago when we heard the youth group share their list of accomplishments for this year alone, it was overwhelming. And how wonderful for parents watching their children grow in the Christian faith and feeling supported in their parenting. Our church is changing lives. The life of someone who feels afraid or hopeless is changed even momentarily when they know they can ask for prayer and that a team will actually pray for them every day, expecting that the miracle of God's loving presence will be felt at what might be the worst time of their life. For those people, our church is changing lives. Music changes lives, and these are life-changing musicians. Who hasn't come to worship some days feeling like the world is doomed and left feeling ready to change our part of it with love? Plus, good food and fellowship changes lives by building community and making us feel a little less alone. Our church is changing lives. Groups meet in our building that learn how to deal with their diabetes, stay sober, recover from debt, learn how to run a small food business, learn how to garden. It's a church where neighborhood children can come and act in a theatrical production, where budding musicians can perform in a recital, and where former foster youth gather for holiday meals. The list of the ways our building serves the community is longer than I actually even know. And it's another way our church is changing lives. And we have so many community partners that broaden our work even further, like Uptown Community Service Center, so someone living on the streets has a place to get their mail and take a shower. Just in time, so a former foster child who needs mental health support or furnishings for their first apartment and help to move in has a community to support them. Feeding Mission Hills. So a neighbor whose grocery bill is too large to buy fresh fruit and vegetables can come to our parking lot every month. A backpack for a student in Barrio Logan preparing to be the first in their family to go to college. Jewish Family Service helping a migrant family who has fled their home for safety. Angel Tree to provide a Christmas present for a child whose parent is incarcerated. The Neighbors in Need offering that provides financial support for the 20 tiny little churches on Indian reservations in South Dakota, allows them to continue to have a church. One Great Hour of Sharing that helps a family whose home was destroyed by natural disaster. The Christmas Fund for the retired pastor who served small churches all their life, who receives a supplement to their pension. Through all these and more community partners, our church is changing lives. But I have to correct that. It's because of you our church is changing lives. So back to the parable of the talents. The third servant doesn't trust himself. Perhaps because he's been told he is worthless. Theologian Edward Schweitzer says the one who won't risk also doesn't trust God. After all, is Jesus really talking about the power of investing in the market or the wisdom of a good business venture? Or is the lesson that God multiplies all gifts entrusted to us when we use them? Which is true of money, it's true of love, it's true of talents like singing and dancing and fiddle playing, and using your leadership gifts, and cooking, and being good at taking care of the details behind the scenes, and every other skill and ability that each of us have to invest in the common good. Like the third servant, it's easy to get caught in fear and therefore put nothing at risk so we don't fail. It's safer to do nothing so nothing will be lost. Except that's how he lost everything. Rather, invest everything into loving. With all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, your time and talents and treasure, without fear. Because then, and only then, can they be multiplied.